to perhaps correct your testimony here today, because you're under sworn testimony, and we're very concerned that we get the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So that you have no knowledge, indirectly or directly, of any retaliation that came against him.
No.
All right, Mr. Edwards, you've worked very closely with Mr. Del Toro. How would you characterize that statement in light of your close working with him?
I don't think Ms. Hedman understands the climate she created at Region 5 EPA. Even before Mr. Del Toro wrote that memo, he told me that he had to protect Flint's children while minimizing the likelihood he would be retaliated against.
So do you think, had he shared with you that he's been retaliated against? Is that your belief?
Well, I mean, obviously he was told not to talk to anyone to Flint or about Flint. A deal of some sort was made between EPA and MDEQ, where MDEQ felt emboldened to say that, quote, they had handled Mr. Del Toro, that Flint residents would not be hearing from Mr. Del Toro again. And so that's when we got involved. I mean, I invested $200,000 of my own money. A team of 25 volunteers from Virginia Tech had to go in and demonstrate that Flint residents were not crazy and that lead in water was high.
So is it your testimony that somehow Mr. Del Toro was handled by the EPA and the Department of Water Quality for Michigan to silence him in his defense of the children of Flint, Michigan?
Absolutely.
Ms. Hedman, how do you respond to that?
I know of absolutely no evidence to substantiate that claim.
Well, let me go a little bit further, because some of what you know and what you don't know is, I guess, the problem, because your testimony here today says that the EPA had no fault. That was in your opening testimony. There is no fault.
No.
And so you stand by, I mean, in light of everything that's coming out, that there's no fault for the EPA on behalf of the EPA.
That is not what I said in my testimony or in my answers to the questions to the
All
chairman.
right, so the EPA is at fault.
I said that I thought we could have done more.
Listen, that's political speak. Are you at fault or not? Yes or no?
In what respect?
In any respect, I guess, Ms. Hedman. I mean, here's the problem is we've got children that have been harmed, and yet we're sitting here equivocating over words that may or may not establish blame, and I'm concerned that what we're doing is we're just wiping our hands of it and saying that I had nothing to do with it. Is that your testimony?
It's not.
All right, so is EPA partially at fault?
I believe we could have done more.
All right, so let me go on a little bit further. Mr. Edwards, in our last time when you were here before this exact same committee, I asked you about a FOIA request from the EPA because you had gotten lots of information from Michigan and zero from the EPA. Did you ever get your FOIA request responded to?
No, there's still outstanding appeals from 9 years ago. The requests that we had for Flint emails came in all redacted, so I hope that...
So when did those come in? When did those come in?
The
day after the hearing?
I did get one FOIA the day after the hearing. Yeah, that was...
Isn't it amazing how it takes a congressional hearing to have the federal law adhered to? So, and it's redacted?
The emails in relation...
More than personal information. Obviously, we want to redact personal information.
The emails that we requested about the Flint water crisis from EPA were almost 90% redacted in terms of deliberative, attorney-client privilege, or unresponsive. Everything virtually was redacted from those emails.
Ms. Hedman, I mean, so redacting all of that, normally when we redact is for national security concerns. Do you think the EPA has a national security concern here?
I'm not familiar at all with the emails.
I'll yield back.
Before the gentleman yields back, Gentleman from Flint.
No, I was going to
Oh,
take my
okay.
turn.
Now recognize the right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back. I want to follow up on some of the things that Mr. Meadows said. The chairman introduced Ms. Edmond a document. It's a email, and it's personal email exhibit 6. But anyway, it's Mr. Del Toro. He's writing a letter to somebody named Rita Bear. You know Rita Bear?
She works in the Region 5 Water Division.
And so apparently he had been denied an opportunity to go to Milwaukee for some kind of conference. And this is what kind of struck me, and it kind of bears out what the chairman and Mr. Meadows have been getting to. It says, I told you about this project during the check-ins as well as in my performance review, so I'm not sure what you intend by your message. This is the piece that gets me. It almost sounds like I'm to be stuck in a corner holding up a pilot plant because of Flint. One misstep in 27 plus years here and people lose their minds. Well, why do you think he said that?
First of all,
He sounds like he feels like he's being retaliated against.
First of all, I had never heard of that email until this morning.
Uh-huh.
And I am appalled that anything might have been done to make him feel that way.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of glad you quit. I'm glad you resigned. Let me tell you why. And I've told the chairman this. There's something going on in that Region 5 that we need to deal with. And I don't know exactly what it is, but there are problems. And I am determined to make sure that we do that. You know, Mr. Early, I got to tell you, I almost vomited when I heard you say something a moment ago. You said that even after you found out that newly manufactured parts were starting to rust out by using the Flint water, that you didn't see that as a problem to be, I mean, wait a minute now, I'm confused. If they're gonna rust out newly manufactured parts, you mean that doesn't send you a warning that maybe human beings might be being harmed? Come on now.
Well, again, I was relying on the information that I was getting from the MDEQ and from the staff. I mean,
But if
I'm not
somebody
a water treatment expert.
You don't have to be a water treatment expert. A 5-year-old can figure that out. But anyway, let me go on to Mr. Walling. As you know, Governor Snyder has agreed to testify, Mr. Walling, before us on Thursday, and I'm looking forward to that. And I really do thank the chairman for having him. It's clear that the governor had a very important role to play in the Flint water crisis. The governor appointed the emergency managers who ran Flint during the crisis, and the governor made the belated decision to help pay for Flint to reconnect the Detroit water system in October of last year. Mayor Walling, I want to get your perspective on how the governor handled the Flint water crisis, because I want to make sure we address everybody who may have been responsible for this fiasco. Mayor Walling, when did you first start having serious concerns about the safety of the water coming from the Flint River?
Well, I had growing concerns as the complaints were coming in from the citizens
Yeah, give me a date. Give me a date.
throughout the summer of 2014.
All right.
And
And when did you first reach out to the governor for help?
I reached out to the governor in January of 2015.
All right. And in your January 18th letter, you wrote, and I quote, "I am writing to convey serious concerns about water quality and to request your support for my proposed Flint water improvement plan." Mayor, why did you write the letter to the governor, and what were you hoping to achieve?
I wasn't seeing enough being done by the emergency managers in Flint to address this problem. I believe this needed to go directly to the governor. I, of course, didn't know what his staff were telling him or not, but he needed to hear directly from me as the mayor of the city what needed to be done to protect and serve the citizens.
And so let me read an internal email from one of the governor's senior staff commenting on your request. He wrote, and I quote, "Mayor Walling is seeking to drag the governor into the conflict with both hands," end of quote. Mayor Walling, what is your response to that, and why do you think the governor, folks wrote that?
I've read similar emails and what's been disclosed, and I was highly disappointed that the chief elected official for the state of Michigan would view my concerns as the chief elected official for the city of Flint in that kind of manner, and that staff around him would be giving him that counsel. And here's a community that's already under the financial manager that's now dealing with a TTHM crisis and other issues that are unresolved, and I come to the governor with a professional letter, comprehensive, and asking for him to respond, to help invest, to come to the city of Flint and meet with residents, which it took him a year to do.
I got it. I get the gist of it. I don't have but so much time. You sent another letter to the Governor Snyder about 8 months later on September 14, 2015. Is that correct?
Yes.
You wrote, and I quote, "The community is heightened, concerned about lead leaching into the water from old service lines and home plumbing, and also needs to be addressed." So, in the quote, so 8 months after your first letter, you were still asking for help to improve the safety of the water in your community, and still nothing was happening. Mayor Walling, how did you feel when you found out that the state was not treating the Flint River water with corrosion control agents for nearly a year and a half? How did you feel?
I was just stunned, because that had been said to me, I know to other staff, to our community in public forums, that it was meeting the standards, that it was comparable with Detroit, that it was safe. We had heard that time and time and time again, and this was from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality that we looked to for that guidance.
Chairman, I just need one more minute. Let me read you another email that Governor Snyder's chief of staff, Dennis Muchmore. And by the way, Dennis, you know Dennis Muchmore?
I do.
He won't talk to us, okay? He was the chief of staff, but he refused to talk to us. So Mr. Muchmore said to the governor in September 2015, he wrote, and I quote, listen to this one. Quote, "Frankly, I think both know that Walling went out on a CYA effort." You know what that means, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, cover it. "Due to the election, but of course can't say so," end of quote. What's your reaction to that email?
Well, it's sickening, because this is when we're getting the research results from Dr. Edwards, and we're looking for ways to respond despite getting resistance, and to suggest that that was a political motive on my part, when I'm doing everything I can despite the budgets that we're required to follow, the contracts that are in place. We're looking for answers. We're looking for help. And it appears that the governor's office did that across the board with our local elected officials, that we were all discounted for some reason.
All right, I gotta quit now, but I gotta tell you, as I'm sitting here listening to all of this, it is sickening, all of it. I mean, there is no reason in 2016 where people should be, when they turn on their faucet, should be getting poisoned water. It's something, and you know what? And somebody said it a little bit earlier. This is like the pointing of a finger. Oh, you did it. You did it. You know, we are so much better than this, and we have to be. This cannot be the norm, and I don't know why it is, but I'm telling you, I think there's a lot of failures, and I hope that we get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Edwards, let me begin with you. Last month when you were here, I asked you some very pointed questions about the EPA's responsibility, and quite frankly, I am shocked, stunned by the audacity of Ms. Hedman's testimony today. Let's begin, if we can, with a brief clip from the hearing last month. Okay, Mr. Edwards, let me go to you. Do you believe in any way that the EPA's management of this whole thing hindered its employees from having the ability to do their job in Flint?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, okay. Do you believe that the EPA's management made the lead crisis in Flint worse?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Who at the EPA do you find fault?
Susan Hedman.
Pardon me?
Miss Susan Hedman, who had the memo buried, covered up, and stood silent as Mr. Del Toro was publicly discredited for his work. When she was questioned by politicians from all parties, through as late as September of this year, she discounted that there was anything of concern in Flint occurring at all, and that includes Mayor Walling, people from the state government, as well as Democratic congressional staff.
Okay. Dr. Edmond, those were powerful words. After seeing this clip, do you still stand by those statements?
Yes, I do, and I'll point out that silence on the part of EPA is interpreted as acquiescence.
All right, well, let's go further then, because there's been more information brought to the table today. Is there anything you would like to add to your statement that we just watched based on previous testimonies we've heard today?
Just that Mr. Del Toro's misstep, as quoted in his email, was his proudest moment, and one of EPA's proudest moments, too.
A few moments ago, Ms. Hedman stated that she responded immediately. And I noticed while she was saying that you were shaking your head. In fact, when given the opportunity, you responded authoritatively that she did nothing. You said it a couple of times. She did nothing. First of all, do you believe that Ms. Hedman has provided some false testimony today when you are saying one thing and she's saying another?
The bottom line is she did nothing immediately to get Flint's children out of harm's way. And she has that obligation. She is the top policeman in the region. And by remaining quiet, silent about what was happening, she was acquiescent. She was allowing Mr. Walling to believe that Mr. Del Toro was a rogue employee that did not speak for the agency. Mr. Walling was quoted in the paper on that. At no point did Ms. Hedman tell Mr. Walling that Mr. Del Toro had done his job and that memo was accurate.
So it's very questionable to you when she says that she acted immediately, whether or not that was really took place. Ranking member, Mr. Cummings, a few moments ago stated that in essence, he smells a rat in Region 5. Was the situation at Flint the first time that you heard of problems in the way that Region 5 was being handled under the leadership of Ms. Hedman?
The first time I heard of problems was when Mr. Del Toro was thinking about how to reveal the problem. Mr. Del Toro was afraid that he would be retaliated against, but he nonetheless had the moral obligation to protect Flint's children. And so in that climate type of environment, what is an employee to do? He took the best course of action that he could to get this memo out, both in EPA and into the hands of Ms. Walters and myself. A press story was written about this memo, and even then, Ms. Hedman covered this up.
So you firmly believe there was a cover-up?
Nothing was done to protect Flint's children.
Okay. Let me ask you
until we got involved, until we started sampling, and I invested $200,000, and this team of volunteers from Virginia Tech donated 4 person-years of effort. They never would have installed corrosion control.
So it would still be taking place?
I believe so. I believe there's no record that MDEQ would have been forced to meet federal law in Flint.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Ms. Kelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for working together to bring those responsible for this crisis here. And I want to thank Mr. Edwards for coming back before this committee again. The crisis in Flint is an inexcusable failure at various levels of government, but we also have an obligation to learn how we can prevent further tragedy. Flint's water crisis is causing local municipalities and cities to take a closer look at their own water supply. Every day, I hear from constituents who want to know if their town's water is safe. I have pregnant mothers that have called me from Fort Heights and fathers in Pembroke Township who want to know that their local governments aren't mismanaging their water supply, given the grave public health and safety dangers that can arise. Mr. Edwards, what would you recommend to municipalities using lead pipes or pipes with lead soldering that are now concerned about their own water